Hello, Twihards and ex-Twihards. I know that it's been a minute since Midnight Sun came out, but I read it. I just thought I'd recap the book for anybody who hasn't read it. I also really just like retelling stories. Anyway, as we know, this book is Twilight from Edward's perspective, and it opens at the high school, which for Edward, with his 2 medical degrees, is a kind of purgatory. Edward is hanging with his siblings, Emmett, the carefree, well-meaning, and actually pretty funny jock himbo, Jasper, the uptight ex-soldier who is still getting used to living life as a vegetarian vampire, Alice, the clairvoyant, adorable one, and beautiful Rosalie, who is mostly a bit preoccupied with herself at first. It's been 2 weeks since they've hunted, which they normally can handle if they're careful, but on a day like today, this isn't good for Edward. You see, this is the day that the new girl is arriving, Chief Swan's daughter Bella. She's moving back in with her dad, and because it's a small town and a tiny school, her arrival is big news all over town and the hallways of Forks High. Edward is spying on everybody's thoughts, seeing Bella's reaction in a lot of them, but he's mostly not that curious about her. He seems mildly amused by the fuss that everybody is making over her, though, as the new girl. As Edward says, though, it is his responsibility to keep his ear to the ground for his family, to make sure that nobody gets suspicious of the Cullens. He can't read Bella's thoughts, and that becomes a great source of frustration for him, and it's why he can only read her through other people's minds. At first, he thinks there might be something wrong with him because this has never happened to him before. Eventually, her scent hits him as she walks into biology like a battering ram, he says. The sweetest blood he smelled in 80 years. And remember, he hasn't hunted in 2 weeks. He wants to kill her and very nearly does. Edward explains, "Thirst burned through my throat like fire. My mouth felt baked and desiccated, and the flow of venom did nothing to dispel that sensation. My stomach twisted with the hunger that was an echo of my thirst. My muscles coiled to the spring." Poor Bella thinks she smells. She's taken aback as Edward is breaking furniture trying to keep it together. He does imagine and fully plan out exactly how he's going to kill her and everyone in the room several times. This is also a serious deal because Edward has never killed innocents. He's only killed criminals in the past. Now, here he is planning to murder a bunch of teenagers. He does get through the hour though by mentally planning how he'll kill her, and then he goes and hides in his car after the bell rings. For the next while, there's a bit of a panic. He tries to change classes in order to avoid Bella, but that's a no-go. He considers leaving Forks altogether because he can't trust himself not to kill her. His family is prepared to pack up and leave, but he decides to drive into the wilderness instead for a timeout, and when he comes back to school, he decides that he just won't breathe around her. Plus, the mild irritation that he felt at not being able to read Bella's thoughts now fascinates him. And also the fact that she didn't tell anyone that he properly freaked out the last time he saw her. Emmett is all, "It's just fine, it's one human, we all slip up sometimes, you can kill/eat her." But Edward is determined to make a go of going to school and not killing Bella. So he gets a do-over and he introduces himself, and we get that cute microscope scene, and she asks him if he got contacts because his eyes are suddenly golden brown. Since everyone is too scared to look too closely at the Cullens, she's the first to notice the color change, which catches him off guard. She's observant. They get to know each other through talking about the weather and Bella's family situation, that Bella left so that her mother could travel around with her new husband Phil. This situation isn't really ideal for Bella, so she chose to live with Charlie rather than have her mother stay home with her and be away from her husband Phil. Carlisle and Esme, bless them, they're really supportive, and of course Carlisle is a doctor, so he says to keep the swan child alive. Then we eventually get to the accident scene where Edward has to make a choice between either letting Bella be crushed by Tyler's van or risk exposure. He decides on the latter and decides to save Bella's life. She's suspicious because she knows that he couldn't have gotten to her from across the car park so quickly, and there's a dent in the car, but Edward doesn't have a scratch on him. She has her suspicions, but she's not about to tell anyone. It's around this time when Charlie arrives at the hospital and Edward notices that his thoughts are quieter as well. They're not exactly blocked off to him like Bella's. He can hear something. His thoughts were partially concealed, not absent. I could only make out the tenor and the tone of them. At one point, Carlisle, examining Bella's x-rays, says, "Look at all these healed contusions. How many times did her mother drop her?" I was going to get mad at Renee, but I guess it's just clumsy Bella who fell a lot. This is when Edward also realizes that it would hurt too much to leave her, possibly because Bella is a puzzle that he can't solve. We know, though, that he's in love with her. He just doesn't know this yet. So Bella tries to unsuccessfully get some answers from him. She wants the truth. She says that she won't let it go. Edward decides to keep going to school because anything else would be really suspicious. Jasper's getting ready to kill Bella, I think, because she's proving to be a bit of an inconvenience, but Alice manages to calm him down. They really almost fight for the first time with each other, with Edward's protective instinct over Bella quickly taking over. So Edward, who unbeknownst to him is kind of falling in love with Bella, gets all involved in the drama of the school dance and the boys asking Bella. He feels particularly jealous of Mike, but lucky for him, Bella isn't interested in Mike. Then he starts worrying about Bella's safety, and like the vampire stalker he is, he climbs into her room while she sleeps to watch her and make sure that she's safe. He can kind of hear her thoughts because she talks in her sleep. He just sits in the rocking chair in her room as she sleeps, and he says that it eases his anxiety. Edward eventually does realize that he loves her, but worries that she doesn't feel the same, until she calls out for him in her sleep, and of course he hears it because he's there. He says, "I would always love this fragile human girl for the rest of my limitless existence. I gazed at her unconscious face, feeling that love for her settle into every portion of my stone body." He doesn't just check up on her, by the way. He often stays until the sun rises. If you'll remember, Twilight's vampires don't actually sleep, ever. Then we move into the friends phase of Bella and Edward's relationship. He kind of wishes that she would stay away from him, and he warns her to. But they're so drawn to one another that neither of them can stay away, even though they're both aware of the danger. Her only maybe vaguely. So eventually the sun is out in Forks, and we know that the Cullens can't be seen, so they take off school. While Edward's family and siblings are all off doing their own thing, Edward spends his time stalking Bella, and it's not just some light stalking. He hides in the bushes opposite the school to read people's thoughts all day. Then he hides in the bushes by her home so that he knows what she's up to. At one point, Bella comes out with a blanket and a book, and he's wondering about her reaction to the book that she's reading. I think it's Wuthering Heights or some similar classic. Edward knows, and he even runs over the story in his mind like he's silently reading with her, but from a distance. Then, of course, he creeps into her bedroom at night to make sure that she's safe, and at one point, he even oils her window so that it's not as noisy. Not to defend him, because his stalking is actually really gross, uncomfortable, and inappropriate. But he is literally a vampire predator after all. But he's more Spike in his lovesick phase than Hot in the Shadows angel energy. So actually, even by predator standards, Edward is pretty creepy. When Edward gets back to school, Bella's frenemy Jessica notices that he's staring at her. He's sitting alone, and he motions for Bella to sit with him, which she does. She's trying to guess what he is, and he's amused by it. They're flirting in their way as he's giving her warnings to stay away from him, even though he doesn't really want her to. He's skipping class again, though, because the kids are blood typing, so of course the vampires aren't going to tempt fate. It's when Edward is in the car that he starts mentally composing Bella's lullaby. Bella faints, obviously, in class because she can't handle the smell of blood, and Edward takes her to the school nurse. It's a whole jealous thing with Mike. But yeah, so Bella decides to take a trip to Port Angeles with Jessica and Angela, and I guess Edward decides to follow her at a safe distance for some reason, and just as well. Bella wanders off on her own to a bookshop. Edward loses her in the faces of the passers-by, but he eventually reads the minds of her would-be attackers, and he drives around and is finally able to track them down. They end up going to dinner because by the time they meet up with Jessica and Angela, they've already eaten. It's during this dinner and the drive home that we get most of Edward's revelations to Bella. She doesn't quite find out that he's a vampire yet. She knows he's something, though. We also get some information about the trypophobia-inducing pomegranate on the cover here. Edward pictures Persephone, pomegranate in hand, dooming herself to the underworld. He wonders if he's Hades. Persephone was the daughter of Zeus, who was abducted by Hades of the underworld. The pomegranate represents life, regeneration, and marriage. By eating a few pomegranate seeds, Persephone tied herself to Hades, the pomegranate being a symbol of their doomed marriage. Bella then tells Edward about La Push Beach and how Jacob told her about the vampires. For Edward, this is a violation of the treaty because the vampires and the werewolves have a treaty to keep the secret as long as the vampires don't hunt or trespass on werewolf land. So Bella knows, but she tells Edward that she's decided that it doesn't matter what he is. This is when we find out about their diet, that he doesn't sleep. So yeah, we find all of this out in the car and not in the meadow like in the movie. The predator who went after Bella is still on the loose, and Edward realizes that just because he was able to save Bella from him doesn't mean that there won't be other girls and women at risk. He decides not to kill the guy, but instead asks Carlisle to deal with him. Carlisle basically sedates the guy and gives him up to the police by leaving an anonymous tip, because apparently he's a suspected murderer anyway. So things are going well with our favorite couple. Edward asks to drive Bella to school, and we get that scene that we all loved in the movie. See, Edward is breaking all the rules now, he says. Edward reads everyone's minds at school to see Bella's reactions. Rosalie's mad this whole time too, by the way, not because she has ever wanted Edward, but because he never fell to her feet like other men did, and she doesn't get his attraction to this one ordinary human girl. It goes deeper than that though with Rosalie, which we'll find out later. Anyway, so Saturday is coming up, the night of the dance. Bella told everyone who asked her no because she has to be in Seattle. Edward suggests they hang out together. Since the sun will be shining that Saturday, he can show her why vampires can't be seen in the sun. So at some point, Rosalie gets wind that Bella knows everything, not just about Edward, but about the whole Cullen family, and she's livid. Of course, she doesn't just see Bella as a threat that might expose them, but Rosalie is jealous. She hates being a vampire and wishes she were human like Bella. Her human life got cut tragically short, so a lot of inter-family drama ensues. Meanwhile, Edward tells us that he's feeling less guilty about sneaking into Bella's room now. He says it's to get used to her scent that literally causes him pain, and he wants them to be together without any of those difficulties. Sure, Edward. At one point, Bella even gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, but she doesn't notice Edward sitting in the corner in the dark, and we get the most boring, what felt like 500 pages where Edward is trying to learn more about Bella. He asks her questions like her favorite books, movies, her favorite colors, her favorite ice cream, and this just lasts all day long. I was getting a bit stressed out about how boring it was. Edward tells us that with Bella, it was like putting a puzzle piece together. One with hundreds of thousands of pieces and no depiction of the complete image to serve as a guide. There is a lot of hand-wringing on Edward's part about holding Bella's hand, which I found oddly endearing. He says, there was still that selfish part of me arguing that holding her hand would not be so wrong, even suggesting that it might be a good way to test her reactions, to prepare myself for being alone together. I tried to ignore the selfish voice and temptation as best I could. He really can't though, so he does really chase things like brush his fingertips across her cheek. So they carry on with the questions. He's asking her what her favorite food is, her favorite flowers, etc, etc, etc. Oh, and then we get a moment where we get the title of the book. Well, Twilight, anyway. Edward points out that it's Twilight, the time when vampires come out to play, when we never have to fear that a shifting cloud might cause us trouble, when we can enjoy the last remnants of light in the sky without worrying that we would be exposed. It's the safest time of day for them, so after this torturous day of questions, Bella asks if it's her turn to ask questions, and I yelled, "Please no," at this book. Edward says no, he's not done yet. Oh boy. Then we get some good minor drama. Edward is dropping Bella off at home, and Jacob and his dad Billy are coming around for a visit. Billy is pretty shaken. Cold One, vampire, Cullen. His thoughts are concerned, but Jacob is Jacob, and he's just pleased to see Bella, and he's a good kid. Edward reads his mind and realizes as much, saying it isn't as difficult to read Jacob's mind as it is Mike Newton's, whose affection for Bella is a little more gross hormonal teen boy. Jacob jokes to Bella about his dad not liking the Cullens, but according to Edward, it's likely that the younger members of the tribe, like Jacob, don't actually know that the Cold One stories are real. Edward goes to Carlisle at the hospital and tells him that he saw Billy. The treaty hasn't actually been broken though, so they're fine. Oh no. Then the next day, it's the questions again. But I'm not going to get into that, I can't. So at school, Alice arrives on the scene, and I remember there was a lot of Alice and Bella fan fiction, and I couldn't stop thinking about that whenever Edward read Alice's thoughts. Eventually they meet, and it's like finally, because Alice has wanted to meet Bella officially for a while now, and she also knows that they're going to be best friends. So Edward and Alice go away for a while, and Alice has this vision of Bella's body in Edward's arms, his mouth stained with her blood. This vision takes place in the meadow where Edward is planning on taking Bella the next day to show himself. She says that their fate together is sealed though, one way or another. If Edward leaves, Bella will get sick and she'll kind of wither away and she won't be the same. And Alice says, if you hadn't come back when you did, if you'd never loved her, you would have come back for her anyway, to hunt her. Edward is understandably upset, trying to think of ways to save Bella, and Alice says putting things off won't change anything. Take her to your meadow, Edward, and for me, and especially for you, bring her back again. She also shares that there's a third option that he could take. It's sketchy, but it's an option. Alice sees Bella aging. She's actually human. There's a version where they could remain as they are, but failing that, Edward thinks about going to the Volturi to end himself, but that could also put Bella in danger. Then we go back into Edward's past and we learn about how he and Carlisle got on as Edward gets used to life as a new vampire and Carlisle works as a surgeon. A few years after that, Carlisle meets Esme. Edward does eventually leave them because he hears from other vampires that he's denying himself the greatest joy of this life by not consuming human blood. So he wants to try it. He goes out cleaning the streets of criminals, but through it all, he still feels he's disappointing Carlisle. Even though technically by killing these criminals, he's saving more people than he's killing, he says that he still missed his parents more than he enjoyed his freedom. So it's the day of the meadow and Edward is nervous. What is Bella going to think when the sun touches his skin? My greatest dread was the expression on her face, the revulsion in her eyes when she finally saw me. We're getting to the good bits, but of course we're still with the questions, so he asks her things like who her favorite elementary school teacher is. I can't. We do learn more about Renee though, who is kind of the worst. She did things like not allow Bella to have a pet fish because that would mean that she would have to stay home. We also get more backstory on the rest of the Cullens as Edward shares his past with Bella. By the way, I don't actually remember this from the original Twilight, but Alice doesn't remember her human life at all. A bad Twihard, I guess. Apparently it's all a bit of a mystery. For now anyway. Eventually Edward reveals himself to her in the sunlight and she tells him that she's never seen anything so beautiful. And he's shocked because he expected her to run for the hills in disgust. You're not repulsed? He asks. Oh, Edward. Then he finally allows himself to think about her blood, like really think about it. He says, but now I let it fill my mind, invade my system, attack my controls, the gushing and throbbing of it, the pounding and sloshing, the surge through the biggest arteries, the ripple through the smallest vein, etc., etc. Eventually his mouth stops watering as he relaxes and he takes it in. Being this close to her and fully breathing, even as her heart throbbed wetly just a foot from my ear. Bella does make the mistake of exposing her neck though, and Edward has another little panic. Eventually, after remembering that Bella has human needs, she needs to eat, have a wee, etc., Edward takes her home and he kind of comes clean about coming to the house to check on her. So Bella finds out that not only did he come to check on her, he actually watched her sleep. And of course, she's mostly worried about what he might have heard in her sleep. Oh, Bella. So eventually Charlie is home and Bella and Edward are in her room. And I gotta say, the bedroom scene in the movie was really one of my favorites. I know it's cheesy, but I loved it. But in the book, it's kind of clumsy and cringy. Anyway, this is the longest scene in history as well. He tells her about his powers and they chastely flirt. They also eventually talk about marriage and neither of them can say the sex word. Edward explains why it wouldn't be possible. If I were too hasty, if for 1 second I wasn't paying enough attention, I could reach out, meaning to touch your face, and crush your skull by mistake. I mean, of course, this is an understandable and valid concern, but yeah, it's a lot. Anyway, Bella asks him, well, do you find me attractive in that way at all? Seriously, Bella. He says, I may not be human, but I am a man. Bella falls asleep in Edward's arms, and in her sleep she tells Edward over and over again that she loves him, and he's elated. So now the next phase of the relationship is for Bella to officially meet the Cullens. Of course, there is the issue of Rosalie. She's jealous of Bella, who is still human, who wants to maybe ruin her life by being a vampire. Remember, Rosalie rather hates being a vampire and she wishes she could be human. She had a rather tragic end to her human life. Edward reassures her that he won't let Bella give up her human life. Eventually, Rose does agree to try and be nice to Bella and accept Edward's choice to love her. Anyway, he rushes back to Bella's house and waits for her to wake up. He watches her eat breakfast as he tells her about meeting his family. Then they start kissing and Bella just faints. Just at that moment, her legs seemed to give out and she slid through my arms toward the floor. I caught her at once, holding her upright. I held up her head with my left hand. It rocked loose on her neck. Her eyes were closed and her lips white. So anyway, she finally goes to meet the Cullen family and it goes really well, even though Rose and Emmett aren't there because Rose needs some time to adjust. Then Edward tells her that some visitors are coming to town. They're curious about the Cullens, so Edward is going to be extra protective of Bella, which is going to be fun, I imagine. He tells Bella his life story again, and then my favorite moment happens. They're play wrestling in his room and Alice comes in and she goes, "It sounded like you were having Bella for lunch. And we came to see if you wanted to share." And then there's more good news. There's going to be a storm tonight, and we all know what that means. The American pastime. Before we get there though, we get an appearance from Jacob. Edward drives Bella home and Jacob and Billy are waiting for Charlie, and Billy does not like the sight of Edward, the cold one. Jacob is kind of disappointed when he realizes that Edward and Bella might be dating. Turns out Billy is there to warn Charlie, and then to kind of antagonize Billy, Edward kisses Bella on her throat. Rude. Then as Edward is hanging out up in the trees again, he listens in on a concerned Billy who tries to gently warn Bella about Edward. She's very pouty and rude to him. It's gross. Eventually Billy and Jacob leave and Edward sneakily follows him and reads Billy's memory of when Carlisle called him years ago to inform him that the Cullens are returning to town. Then it's all very boring again. We get the scene where Edward's at home, he messes up the floor and Esme asks him to clean it up and we literally have to be there while he mops a spill on the floor. Stephenie, why? I want to get to the baseball game. Okay, so Edward goes to pick up Bella and she's sulking, telling Charlie about Edward. "Don't embarrass me, Dad." They leave for the woods and then we spend 100 hours, I swear, in the Jeep and getting out of the Jeep. Then they make out again. Edward gets carried away. They have a bit of an argument and then they make up. Okay, then they get to the clearing and it's time, Alice says. Okay, so while the scene in the movie is pretty much cinematic perfection, it lasts about 100 pages in the book and I don't like reading about sports games and books, so I'll admit I skimmed this part a bit. Then Alice gets a bunch of visions of incoming vampires. They're less than 5 minutes away and they want to join in on the game. So in the scene, as the group is in a tension-filled stare-off, Jasper uses his powers to regulate the emotions of everyone there to ease the tension and make the group less interested in Bella. He can do that. Then there's a gust of wind and the vampires smell Bella. James is ready to attack and Edward crouches ready to counter. "You brought a snack," James says. Laurent tries to keep the peace, but James is already in hunter mode. Finally, Carlisle manages to get everybody to go peacefully home, but they know that they're being chased. Alice, Emmett, and Bella race away in Emmett's Jeep, and oh goodness, when Bella is like, "Take me home, Edward," Edward instructs Emmett to restrain her. Emmett was already wondering if he should restrain her. I spoke his name low and hard so he would know that I wanted him to do this. He caught her wrists carefully in his huge hands and immobilized them. Bella is a little bit silly here. She's stressed that the Cullens are throwing their lives away over her, and she can't take that. It's weird because I thought that all of these danger moments would actually be fun for the Cullens. They are vampires after all, and cosplaying as humans for 100 years must be so boring. Edward explains to Alice and everyone in the car that James is a tracker, something they don't really see outside of stories. Trackers have a talent for finding people and things, and tracking is everything to James. And now he's set his sights on Bella. They're stressing out, going over the options on how to kill James. Then Alice, who has seen a future with Bella as a vampire, suggests that they maybe speed up that timeline. But Edward isn't having it. Bella eventually suggests going home to pack and tell Charlie that she's leaving so that James isn't on Charlie's trail and that at least Charlie wouldn't call the FBI. Alice and Emmett actually think it's a good idea. Poor Alice at this point. Edward says she's seeing like 30 visions. 30. We've reached the save Elena, protect Elena, all things Elena part of Twilight. Okay, so Bella is at home packing her things and pretending like she's broken up with Edward. Poor Charlie. She tells him, "I can't do this anymore. I can't put down any more roots here and I don't want to end up trapped in this stupid boring town like Mom. I'm not going to make the same mistake she did. I hate it. I can't stay here another minute." Goodness, she's awful. I get why she has to do this, but Charlie is just so broken. I can't. So they're on their way and the tracker is behind them. They get back to the Cullen house and Laurent tells them that he's staying out of this. He feels bad for them, but he can't put himself in danger by getting in James's way. Okay, so they're back on the road and Edward is traveling with Carlisle. Bella is traveling with Alice and Jasper. At one point, there's this bizarre moment where Edward is giving Carlisle instructions to give to Alice. Bella needs to eat at least 3 times every 24-hour period, and hydration is important. She should have water on hand. Ideally, 8 hours of sleep. If Bella has questions, deflect them. Tell her I'm very serious about this. Anyway, so this scene is really long, and at one point they throw themselves out of a Jeep that's still moving and they chase the trucker on foot for hours. They even dive into a lake to chase him, and I don't know how time passes in this book. Is this the next day? Oh, just as I wondered that, the sun rises, so yes. Anyway, eventually they lose him and some of them head back to Forks while Alice is in Phoenix at a hotel with Jasper and Bella. Then Edward decides that he's going to fly to Phoenix, and we have to read that he bought a hoodie at the airport gift shop because he needs to be low-key and the sun is shining in Phoenix. He also talks about the cabin crew. I don't know. Bella runs off, being self-sacrificing. Finally, we get to where James and Bella are. Edward goes after the tracker as Bella is bleeding in the corner. Her heartbeat is weak. The others basically rip James apart and they're all kind of struggling because of Bella's blood, as Carlisle works at trying to save Bella. Then we get another of my favorite moments from the movie. James had bitten Bella and his venom is coursing through her veins. Edward has to suck it out. Eventually, as he's about to lose himself and kill her, she tells Edward to stay with her, and that's how he regains control. Eventually, Bella is in the hospital and she needs a blood transfusion, and Edward makes this about him for a second. He goes, "The new blood pulsing through Bella's body altered her scent in a way that I should have anticipated, but it took me by surprise. While I was aware of a significant lessening of my thirst pain, the strange blood seemed an interloper, alien. It wasn't part of her, and I resented the intrusion, irrational as that was." They call Charlie to let him know that Bella took a tumble, but she's fine. And then Renee, Bella's mother, comes by. By the way, James tells Bella that Alice was once a potential victim, but she got turned before he could get to her. So in the hospital, Edward gives Bella a rundown of her injuries and tells her that she got a transfusion that made her smell wrong. Also, Renna is kind of the worst. I don't know. Phil has been signed to a baseball team, which means that he'll be home more often, and now it's convenient to have Bella live with them. Bella asks why Edward didn't let the venom spread in her. She can't always be Lois Lane. She wants to be Superman too, she says. Then they talk about turning. Basically, Bella is keen and he isn't. Bella is being the worst, refusing to take her meds, refusing to rest, begging to be turned. She ends up staying in hospital for another 6 days, and Edward, ever the drama queen, is in agony. They go back home and Alice helps nurse Bella back to health. Then Bella is back in school in a wheelchair, Edward wheeling her around to all of her classes. Is this how it was in Twilight? I honestly don't remember. Anyway, when she finally gets a boot and crutches, Edward actually says that he prefers the chair because it's hard for him to watch her while she's struggling with the crutches. Well, the prom rolls around and Alice gives Bella a makeover, and Bella's being a bit of a baby about it. And she says, "I'm not coming over anymore if Alice is going to treat me like a guinea pig Barbie when I do." I know she's half kidding, but Also, in the book, her shoe is described as a blue satin shoe with a stiletto heel and long ribbons wrapped up her leg to hold it in place. I really prefer the movie version of her Converse. Anyway, Bella realizes that Edward is taking her to the prom and she's all, "Why are you doing this to me?" And she starts crying. We get to Forks High and they have their dance, but it's not in the pretty gazebo. It's with the rest of the kids on the dance floor. Ooh, then Jacob arrives. His dad paid him to go to the prom and tell Bella to break up with Edward. Surprisingly, Edward allows them to dance. When he comes back, he says he, as in Jacob, called you pretty. My voice made the word into something unpleasant. That's practically an insult. The way you look right now, you're much more than beautiful. So Edward asks her, "Where did you actually think I was taking you before you realized that it would be the prom?" And Bella, who is now so above being a human in high school, scoffs and she says, "I didn't think it would be some trite human thing. Prom." She tells him that she thought he was going to turn her. They have the turning conversation again and profess their love for one another. That's the end. I've been on camera way too long, so I'm gonna go now. And that's the end of the video and the book. Thank you for watching. Bella wanders off, and just as well, sorry.